Juanil's Mall in the City of Industry, Hacienda Heights. I worked in the toy store there, so I crashed his set when I was in high school, and I watched them film these scenes. When I started at Universal in 1989 as a tour guide, we were making Back to the Future Part 2, and I hung out on the set of that movie, and I kind of learned a lot of what I know about filmmaking from watching people like Bob and Robert Zemeckis making those films. So I had a long, long history for the film, so I immediately stuck my head in this office and I said, I want to be involved. Whatever we do, I want to be involved. And I think it was Bob's recommendation to get Joe involved. And at first I was like, the fans that built these replica cars, but he was absolutely right, because what they brought to the project, and documented so well in Steve's film, is passion. And once we started talking, I was like, and I'm kind of the unofficial studio historian for Universal, and I thought I knew a lot about Back to the Future. And these guys' knowledge blew me away at how much they knew about not only the movies, but the car itself. So once we all met about it, we knew that the car needed to be restored by the very people who had the most love for the film franchise, which is the fans.
Oh, that's heavy. I really do love this the circle of life, so to speak, with the DeLorean, that the films and the car inspired so many people to build their own cars, and now these fans, full of so much passion and love for the series, we're now returning the favor by restoring the A car, which is right here, ladies and gentlemen. And Steve, I just want to talk about, and definitely Joe, where did you begin? Like, what was step one?
That is a long question.
Loaded question.
That's a long way back. Yeah. Step one on the whole journey?
No. Step one, like, okay, you got the car. It's like, you're looking at it going like, okay, where do you start?
What do you mean, this car?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The first thing we did was look at each other and say,
What did we agree to?
yeah, this is a much bigger job than we expected. And we knew what we were getting into. We thought we knew, but we didn't know. It was bad. So the first thing we did was take every single piece off the car, whether it was the stock DeLorean parts or the time machine parts, and we photographed them, cataloged them, and we came up with a plan on restoring a lot of parts. Would take probably longer than we had, but we had a lot of guys and equally passionate about the job, and we just kung fu'd it.
Yeah, Joe, he actually makes it sound almost easier than it was, because the restoration was a year-long frame-off, ground-up restoration. Joe got the car, and this was down to just the frame, and they even took the wheels off. It didn't even look like a DeLorean. And you sit there and you see it in that state, and your first reaction is this.
I hope it goes back together.
Yeah, like, oh my God, I hope we can put this back together, because Universal and Bob and millions of fans across the world are counting on that.
It was a lot of pressure.
It was a ton of pressure, especially on Joe, but Joe had a team of about 24 guys, the best DeLorean builders and time machine builders in the world, and from all over the planet coming.
And they were insane. I mean, these guys were crazy.
I have the emails to prove it.
Yeah.
which was one of the reasons that I knew it had to be a fan-based project, because every wire, every bolt on that car is accurate. And these guys lost sleep trying to make sure that they replicated stuff. They contacted some of the original people that worked on the car. Chaffee, stand up. This is Michael Chaffee. One of the reasons that the car looks as cool as it is because of all the work that Michael put into it. But I know there were moments when Joe would contact Michael and Michael said, I don't know. And say they were going to get it perfectly done. They were, it was almost like religious fanaticism that they had to get it right, and they did.
And also, what I would add to that, Bob, is, the goal was to get it back to screen condition, which means how it looked when Industrial Light and Magic turned over the car to the production. But they didn't stop there. I mean, the car does things, and you guys can probably talk a little bit about this. The car does so many more things than it ever did in the movie.
ILM did not do that. The ILM built the miniatures and stuff and did the effects, but the car was built here in LA. But the time circuits, the sounds that everything makes, when we shot that stuff, it didn't do all that. The time circuits to light them up, we had to have a guy off camera. If you push the buttons on the keypad, it didn't do anything. But this car does. You can input the time, the calendar dates. It makes all those noises. You turn the switch, it makes all those noises. It's all sound effects when we did it, but we had the best guys in the world working on this thing to make it as great as it could possibly be.
Why? I mean, you could have just gone for the look, but you went for the sound too. You went for every button to have a function, to make it sound. What made you go I want to say the extra mile, but you went the extra gigawatt. Thank you. Went the extra gigawatt.
There's a couple of reasons, but mostly I felt like I owed it to the fans, to everybody. This was mine and the team's way of giving back to a movie that gave us so much for so long, and this was kind of us giving back, and we didn't want to do it half-ass. We wanted, I asked the team. Well, they asked me, what do you want it to do? And I was like, everything. It was a lot.
And it does.
I'm actually going to just go out on a limb and say that if we actually took that thing to 88 miles per hour, it would go back in time.
That was the running joke on the restoration team. They said that Joe took this project so serious, it was as if he expected the time machine to actually function.
Yeah, but you don't know if it doesn't.
Yeah.
No plutonium.
So
Anymore.
when they were finished, for both of you guys, when you saw the restoration complete, like, what did that feel like?
Really proud.
Yeah.
Because, I think when you work in a movie studio, the temptation is to take for granted how important these films are to the fan community. I was looking it up today, just box office, in the entire history of Universal Pictures, which is an over 100-year film history, Back to the Future is still in the top 20, just domestic box office all time. That's after all the Fast and the Furious movies and all the, Jurassic Park movies. And that's not adjusted for inflation or anything. That's just how big of a hit this movie was. It was the #1 movie of the entire year back in 1985 when it was released. But even more importantly, it lives on and lives on from generation to generation to generation. And you meet so many people who just to be able to see the real car in person is such, and that's why a lot of you are here tonight. It's a huge honor for all of us that got to work on this project, to take something that is, one of the great icons of all of movie history and bring it back to life so that the fans can enjoy it for years and years and years to come.
How about you, Bob? What was it like for you when you first saw it?
Well, it was similar to when I first saw the finished car on the set. Remember, I've been watching it being built, but the fact that it actually did all this stuff that the car in the movie didn't actually do. It was like the movie was right there in front of me. I was totally blown away, and it it was just a fantastic moment to know that, all right, it's beautiful, it's perfect, and it's going to be around for a long time.
How many of you went on October 21st to rewatch the 3 films on the big screen? All right, we have the best crowd here tonight. For what? Yeah, I stayed up though through till the end. And, like the next morning, I was driving to work and I stopped off at Starbucks on the corner of Franklin and Highland. You know, where all the homeless people hang out. And I'm in line and this guy's wearing a heavy vest. So I said, "Hey kid, what's with the life preserver?" And he's looking at me like, forget it. But you know, one thing I noticed at the screenings was that there were a lot of kids running around with Back to the Future t-shirts, and that hat, I mean, that hat for Back to the Future 2, I saw somebody wearing a t-shirt that says Jaws 19. This time it's really, really personal. What is it like for Bob and John, you know, the legacy of Universal Studios, that it's like crossing over into generations, just like the Star Wars movies have done?
It goes to what I said earlier about the fact that it captures that human moment, and kids get that, even though they don't understand every joke, they don't understand they may not understand every reference. It's Back to the Future. It's a human story, and the movies that live on are always about characters, and so many movies that live on are also family stories, and so this. You know, we have I got one of the best casts you can imagine, and you can watch Back to the Future over and over again because you love watching Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd and Leah and Crispin Glover and Tom Wilson. Everybody knows who those characters are. They can identify with those characters. Everybody's been picked on by a bully. Everybody wants to knock the bully down on his ass. And everybody wishes they could travel through time and go find out what did my parents actually do that, or were they just handing me a whole bunch of crap all my life?
He's a peeping Tom. How about, you know, John, for the decision to, like you said, when the car was on display, it was outside in front of the ride, and now it's here at Petersen. Why is this the perfect place for the A car, the time machine, DeLorean?
Well, we had the car after Joe and the team restored it. We had the car on display indoors at Universal, but as you mentioned kind of at the beginning, we've got a lot of stuff going on right now. It's 75% of the park has changed, not only with Harry Potter, but it's just going through this epic transformation right now. The facility where we had the car on display is no longer there. So I remember emailing Bob and Joe and saying, the car is not going back outside. So, you know, no matter what happens, it's not going back outside. The work you guys did was so amazing. We got to make sure that it's preserved for all time. So it went into storage for a while, and we were looking for a place that would be appropriate for, you know, the car to go back on display. And the whole reason to do that, we could have left it in storage. It would be safe and everything would be wonderful and be preserved. But that would do such a huge disservice to the fans of this film. We wanted to have the car someplace where the fans could see and enjoy it. And when you think about where that could be in Los Angeles, we wanted it to be in Los Angeles where this film was made, you know. The Petersen was #1 on our list because, you know, if you guys have not had a chance yet, you know, I'm sure you've had a chance, but since the remodel, this is an amazing, amazing museum. It's world class, the collection's world class, and we thought this is the place where the car should be on display. So we were really happy that we could work with the Petersen to do this and give the fans a place where they can all come now and appreciate the work that Joe and his team did and see this incredibly iconic, you know, piece of Hollywood history.
So I want to open up to the audience. I'm sure if you have any questions about the actual restoration of the DeLorean, of the time machine, now will be a great time to ask. Anybody have any questions about the restoration of this amazing piece of Hollywood history. Yes?
How long did the restoration take, and how much work did you put into it?
How long did it actually take?
The restoration kind of happened in two parts. There was the planning and then the execution, and the execution took a year, planning took another year, and as far as how much work we put into it, all of it.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Joe, it was like, I think we were hoping like 6 months originally. But when we saw the passion that these guys were bringing to it and what they wanted to do, even though the schedule said this has to be done in this amount of time, I was running the project and I was like, no, we're gonna give these guys as much time as they need because they're gonna do it right and the proof is in front of you.
And it took longer to restore the car than it did to make it the first time.
Yeah, because
That's, if any of you have ever remodeled a house, it's the same story, To remodel a house, to restore a house, always takes longer than you're halfway through, you say, why didn't I tear this damn thing down and start from the beginning? But because it was the real car, that option wasn't open. So it's kind of interesting that it took longer, probably 3 or 4 times longer to restore the car than it did to make it.
because I was just going to say, I believe the original car took about 10 weeks to build for the film.
Yeah, 10 or 12 weeks.
Yeah, and to answer her question, Joe said it took a year, but when he says it took a year, he meant that there were about 24 guys working full time, including weekends, for an entire year to get the car looking like this. And that's, and it was insane to watch. So he's downplaying it, and I just want to point out that they had the deadline, and Joe was determined to make that deadline, and Joe proudly finished the car 4 hours before Universal came to pick it up.
4 hours. That's
But
impressive.
I mean, it was 3 in the morning, and they picked it up at 7.
If only we had more time.
Yeah, out of time is the theme that ran through this entire restoration.
I understand there's a story, a backstory about Mr. Fusion.
Yeah, one of the things in making the film and documenting Joe and the restoration team, back in the day, some of you may have gone to Universal Studios in the late 90s and noticed that the Mr. Fusion that was on the car looked a little different than you remember.
Yep.
And what happened was, at one point, Mr. Fusion had gone missing. It had either been misplaced or somebody, an eager fan maybe, took it home as a souvenir. And so they had to replicate it. And so one of the in-house teams built a Mr. Fusion that put on the car, and it was about, what would you say it was, like
9 feet tall.
yeah, it was like 9 feet tall, and it looked like a giant stovepipe. And it sat on the car for quite a while, and that was fine, but what happened is during the same time, Sunstar came to take photos for their 1/18 scale replica, I believe, and they took photos of that on the car, and that's what ended up on the Sunstar models. And so we say that they made a very, very accurate version of a very inaccurate prop. But thankfully, once they found out, they did go back, they changed it, put the right Mr. Fusion on, and now there is no Mr. Fusion on because they went with the nuclear reactor style.
Who else? Yes, you have a question.
Was there some secrecy around the restoration, and where did you do it?
Was there secrecy around the
Yes.
restoration? Where did you do it?
We did it at a secret location. No, we really did. I mean, we did it. It was done in a property that we have that's secret, so I can't tell you. But it was all, and that made it very difficult for these guys because they couldn't just take it, home to Joe's house or something and do it in his backyard. Plus, the insurance considerations and all that. So it had to be done at a specific facility, and they had to come to that facility to do the work, and they could only work at that facility when they were working on the car.
And it was really far away.
Yeah, it's really far away, but it's secret.
Yeah, this is a question for Bob. I've heard a rumor that you have been asked to consider a different car for the time machine.
Yeah, not a rumor. It's a good story. I'll tell it. Everybody loves it.
4.
Back to the Future. All 3 of the movies, 1 and 2, really, not 3. We have a lot of product placement. Product placement is when you're going to have somebody drink a soft drink. Is it going to be Coke or is it going to be Pepsi? And the soda companies will give you free soda or pay for you using their brand. So one of the things that we did with the Back to the Future movies, to create a time period, you want to use brand names and brands that evoke the time period. So the Texaco logo changed over 30 years, so that was a much better choice than Shell, whose logo didn't change. And Pepsi was a much better choice than Coke, because Pepsi's logo changed. And Universal hired a product placement guy who was a little bit sleazy to come and pitch us different products to put in the movie. And one day, and we would get money for that, obviously, well, which is, and he would take half of whatever money he could drum up. Pretty steep, bad guy. Anyway, he comes into my office one day with the woman from Universal, and he says, I've got a product placement opportunity, Bob, that will give the production $75,000. I said, okay, Richard, I'm listening. The movie was costing $40,000 or $50,000 a day to shoot back then. So this is a day and a half's worth of shooting. Okay, I'll listen to that. He said, if you change the DeLorean to a Ford Mustang, Ford will pay, you'll get $75,000 from Ford. And I looked right at him and I said, Richard, Doc Brown doesn't drive a fucking Mustang.
Never gets old. Yes, right, you had a question.
I have a question for Bob and anyone else. And showcasing the model here and more so to other sound nerds, the sound effects of the car are almost as iconic as the car itself. And I just wonder, Bob, when you first heard the sound effects, is that what you had pictured on set? Because you mentioned you didn't hear any sounds when you were there. And does anyone else have comments on the sound?
We weren't really thinking about what the sounds were going to be, because when you're shooting a movie, you want to get the work done. You know, you only have so many hours to shoot. You want to get the shots. We had Charles Campbell, Chuck Campbell, was our supervising sound editor, and Bob and I have worked with him on our previous movies. Chuck was a genius at sound. He always came up with really. When you hire the best people, they come up with things that you would have never thought of. One of my favorite sound effects in Back to the Future, separate apart from the sounds that he and his guys created for the DeLorean, which are fantastic, but the little details, George McFly's shoes squeak in the 50s. You listen real carefully. But my favorite gag is at the when Doc drops Marty off in 1985, and the car takes off down the street, you hear the explodes, you hear a distant dog barking. You know, it's like, wow, yes, of course. So if there was an explosion like that, we'd hear dogs barking. So it was Chuck Campbell and his crew that came up with this stuff, and they'd preview the sound effects, and Bob and I would listen to stuff, and say, when you turn loose the best guys in the world, whether they're car restorers like this guy, or sound effects guys, whoever, they're going to come up with some great stuff.
Yes, you, right there, yeah.
My question is for Steve and Joe. How did you guys connect with the documentary? Like, how did that come up?
How did you guys connect to the documentary?
Well, Joe, I had known Joe. We had known each other for several years, and Joe, I won't go into the whole story, but he was building his first replica, and he showed me pictures, and I said, I have got to meet you. So we got to know each other, got to be friends. But as far as Joe had been hired by them to do the restoration, and then as far as my involvement, when I found out Joe got the project, I said, Joe, I've got to help you restore the time machine. He goes, great. Can you fix a car? I said, no. He goes, do you know anything about props? I said, no. Do you do electronics? No. Welding? No. And he just looks at me and goes, what the hell can you do? And I said, I can film it. And that became my official job. So while Joe and the team worked on the car, my job was to not touch it and to film all of them restoring the car, which I could then turn into a movie, which the full-length feature version comes out this summer. Yes.
You're in the back, yes.
Although I'm sure it's priceless to most of us, and insurance companies are usually pretty eager to put a value on it, what is the assessed value of this?
It's priceless. It's a time machine. Got a question right there, yes, yeah.
I'm curious, this goes way back, before the movie came out. How did Universal, for example, come across the car before it was converted? How did it come across it or find within 5 to 6 months before there was Craigslist and eBay on this?
The question is, how do we come across these DeLoreans? Is that right?
Back then.
Back then, well, it wasn't that hard. You know, you buy a used car. I mean, you look at the want ads, you make a few phone calls. It was pretty easy to buy. We bought 3 DeLoreans for the first movie, and then when we found out we were making the second one, we bought 3 more. And even then, they were pretty easy to find and buy.
Yes.
All legal.
So, along with that, where are all those other cars now?
That's a good question. Where are all the other cars? You've got them.
Let's see. For the first film, there were 3 cars. The A car, which was the hero car, and it's there. The B car, which was a lot like it, but it was actually the car that was hit by the train in the end of part 3, so it's nowhere.
Or it's everywhere.
Or everywhere.
So the time displays from that car are sitting on my fireplace mantle.
And the C car was just half a car, and it was just, they were done with it. It was dismantled. It doesn't exist anymore. Then for part 2 and 3, there were 2 more DeLoreans that were converted into the off-roader style with the white walls. And one of those is owned privately now. And the other one is Universal Japan on display in front of the ride.
Who has the train?
The miniature train is in the Universal Archive, actually. We've had it in display in the park. So that's in Universal's archives and collections, along with some other props in Back to the Future movies.
There's a couple more cars. There's
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
The big train is in Florida.
Yeah, the miniature train's the one we have in our archive.
There was another car that was, it's referred to as the Oxnard car because it did the Papa Wheelie actually in front of the train. That was a totally different car, and that car is at Universal Florida. And the other one was fiberglass, and I think that was just dismantled.
Yeah, the fiberglass car was designed so that we could hang it from a wire, so when the car is actually flying, it's that car. If it's not a miniature.
Yeah, but that question, how many cars, is actually a whole rabbit hole that you could fall down forever when it came to the restoration, because over the years, parts had been swapped among all these cars. And so Joe and his team had to go through and CSI forensic analysis. That red capacitor went to the B car in '95 and then went here, and these parts got swapped. And so they had to do all this research, which is a lot of that year process, in gathering all these original A car parts back to get them back on the original car. And you know, those cars are spread all over the world, and they had to go through and find out, oh, that's that piece, go get it.
And I had to send the emails to get them for them. Because, yeah, we had to get parts from the Florida car that were original to the first film and have them replaced and all that stuff. So.
What would happen while we were shooting is that something would break on one car, or a door panel or a fender would get dented, and we didn't have time to fix it. So what we would do is we'd cannibalize the part off of another car. So that's how there were a lot of mismatch. I mean, they weren't mismatched, everything fit. But
it was really hard to keep track of all those changes. But actually, you just asked about the Planet Hollywood car. There was a car on display on the roof of Planet Hollywood, and that actually is the B car technically that got hit by the train. But it's not a real DeLorean at this point. It's just the panels welded together. But it is real. Also, there was an audio question or something I wanted to add to it, and that is when we did the electronics and the sound effects for the car, we didn't just like rip those sounds from a Blu-ray, we got them from Universal. They're the original audio tracks for the film.
So I think when they were doing the Blu-ray and everything, when they were restoring the audio for home video and home entertainment, those source material is more easily defined because of things like that than it would be, because source material for films tends to literally live in an abandoned mine shaft somewhere, because that's typically where they still store film elements. It's old mines way down way below the Earth's surface, because the atmospheric conditions are really good for preserving those elements. So when you're trying to find original film elements, it's really difficult. But luckily, because of the popularity of the film and all the home entertainment releases, we were able to get them. So.
Yes, you.
Where was the original car built and by whom?
Where was the original car built? The original, this
car.
Original car that is right here at the Petersen. Originally, where was it built?
Mike, it was in North Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shop in North Hollywood called Film.
Company called Film Tricks. They had a shop in North Hollywood.
Right here.
Is this car a composite of different year DeLoreans, or is it a single year DeLorean?
Is this car a composite of different DeLoreans or a single year
No,
DeLorean?
this is a 1981. It's not a composite. It's just one year.
Right there, ma'am, you, yes.
This particular car, the exposed cables and wires, are they actually functioning, or are they just there for show?
I thought about making them functional.
That's
great. But they're not.
Prove it.
That was
Yes.
probably a wise decision.
The beard, yes, you, in the black shirt. Right there.
Can you briefly tell us what exactly is the, how do you restore a car?